In the glittering heart of a luxury restaurant, a frail old man dares to ask for mercy, and is met with cruelty instead. A waiter's pride and prejudice explode into violence, turning a simple plea for food into a public humiliation. Laughter ripples, cameras roll, and dignity is shattered on polished marble floors. Yet beneath the old man's trembling hands lies a truth none of them see coming. And when he reaches into his tattered coat, the room's laughter dies in its throat. The chandeliers glowed like captured stars, casting golden light across polished marble floors. Laughter clinked with wine glasses, and soft jazz hummed through the air of La Belle Maison, the city's most exclusive restaurant. Waiters in crisp black uniforms glided between tables, attending to the elite who spoke in low, confident tones about stock markets, vacations, and art. No one noticed the door open at first. He slipped in quietly, a frail old man, clothes torn and layered with dust, beard white and unkempt, eyes sunken yet strangely gentle. His shoes were gone. His bare, cracked feet shuffled softly against the floor. A hush followed him like a shadow as he inched toward a corner table where a wealthy couple dined. "Please," he whispered, voice trembling. "Just a small piece of bread. Anything." The woman gasped and clutched her purse. The man wrinkled his nose. Heads turned. Murmurs rose, and then came Lance, a young waiter with slicked-back hair and too much arrogance for his pressed uniform. "Hey!" he barked, storming toward the old man. "We don't allow people like you in here." The old man flinched but didn't move. "I'm not here to—" "Save your story!" Lance spat, grabbing the man's shoulder and spinning him around. "You're filthy. You're disgusting. This place is for people who work, not beg." The room chuckled, soft at first, then louder. Phones appeared, cameras recording the spectacle. The old man's eyes darted nervously as heat crept up his neck. "Still," he whispered, "just food." Lance's rage boiled over. "I said get out!" And then, smack, the slap cracked through the restaurant like a gunshot. The old man stumbled, nearly falling. A glass shattered somewhere. The room fell silent. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. The old man stood trembling, one hand pressed against his reddened cheek. A tear slipped down his face, carving a clean path through the dirt. His lips quivered, but he didn't speak. He only looked at Lance, not with anger, but with a sadness so deep it pierced the waiter's chest. "Out!" Lance hissed again, his voice smaller now, though still sharp. "Before I call the police." The old man nodded slowly, lowering his gaze. But instead of turning to leave, his frail fingers reached into the inside pocket of his torn coat. The room tensed, some guests leaning back in their seats, uncertain. When his hand emerged, it wasn't empty. It held a glint of gold, worn but unmistakable. And as the light caught it, the laughter died completely, replaced by a stunned, breathless silence. The waiter's eyes widened as he read the name engraved on it, a name he had seen before, carved in brass on the restaurant's front door. The card lay gleaming on the marble floor like a shard of the past come to life. Lance stared at it as if it were a ghost. His fingers trembled as he bent down to pick it up, heart hammering in his chest. It was heavy, far heavier than it looked. Polished gold, engraved with a single unmistakable name, Elias Carter. Lance blinked, then blinked again. No, it couldn't be. That Elias Carter? The same name etched into the bronze plaque outside the restaurant doors? The same name on the framed photo in the lobby? The man whose vision had built La Belle Maison decades ago? The blood drained from his face. He stumbled back a step. All around him, the room shifted. Laughter that had moments ago filled the air now turned to stunned whispers. Guests craned their necks, eyes widening as recognition flickered in their expressions. Someone gasped audibly. Another lowered their phone, ashamed of what they'd been recording. "Lance!" hissed a voice. It was the floor manager, rushing over with panic etched into every line of his face. "What have you done?" I didn't know," Lance stammered, still clutching the card like it might burn him. "I swear I didn't—" But the manager wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on the old man, and his voice shook as he spoke. "Mr. Carter, is it really you?" The old man didn't answer. He stood still, hands folded gently before him, the faintest glimmer of sorrow in his tired eyes. Slowly he reached out, took the card back from Lance's shaking hand, and tucked it into his coat as though it were nothing more than a scrap of paper. "Sir," the manager said again, bowing slightly now, "we are deeply, deeply sorry. Please let us offer you—" "Water," the old man interrupted softly. "Just a glass of water." The room froze again. That was all he asked for. No shouting, no anger, no demands. Just water. Lance swallowed hard as he poured it himself, his hands unsteady. As he set the glass down on the table before the old man, he whispered, "I didn't know who you were." The old man's gaze lifted, meeting Lance's eyes for the first time since the slap. That, he said quietly, is the problem. Silence pressed down on every soul in the room. Even the jazz music had stopped, and as Elias Carter sipped his water in that once hostile dining room, the walls themselves seemed to close in on Lance. Because he knew, deep down, that this was far from over. Whispers rippled through the room like waves after a stone hit still water. Elias Carter. The name now hung in the air, heavier than the chandelier lights, heavier than Lance's guilt. The manager stood rigid, face pale as parchment. Even the wealthy guests who had once sneered at the old man now lowered their eyes, shame curling their lips. The silence was broken only by the soft clink of the glass as Elias set it back down. "Is it really you?" the manager asked again, voice trembling. Elias nodded faintly. "It was once," gasps echoed. Phones were tucked away. Those who had mocked him minutes ago now whispered about the legend. The visionary philanthropist who built this restaurant from nothing, who had donated millions to shelters and schools, until one day he vanished. Some said he'd fled the country. Others claimed he had died. No one knew the truth. Until now. Lance felt the floor tilt beneath him. His breath came in sharp bursts. "I didn't know," he choked. "I swear, sir, I didn't know." Elias turned to him then, slowly, deliberately. His gaze was not angry. It was worse. It was disappointed. "I know," Elias murmured. "That's the point." And then the story poured out. Not in a speech, but in quiet fragments that stabbed deeper than any shout. How a partner he trusted stole everything. How his family walked away when the money vanished. How, stripped of power, he had chosen anonymity, wandering, the streets he once drove through in luxury, just to see how people treated those they believed worthless. "I learned more in those years than I ever did in boardrooms," he said softly. "And today, I learned again." Lance's knees buckled. He collapsed to the floor, his hands pressed together as if in prayer. "Please," he whispered, tears streaking down his cheeks. "Please forgive me. Don't ruin my life for one mistake. I'll do anything." Elias stared at him for a long, heavy moment. Memories clawed their way back, of his own arrogance, his own careless words to those beneath him. He had been Lance once, and someone had once looked at him with the same mixture of disgust and pity. His hands clenched on the table's edge. The room waited, breathless. Elias leaned forward slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me, Lance, if you were in my place right now, what would you do?" Lance's lips parted, but no words came, only sobs. And as Elias rose slowly to his feet, the weight of a decision hung in the air, a decision that would define both their lives forever. 3 days later, the heavy oak doors of La Belle Maison swung open again, not with the same proud exclusivity they once had, but with a quiet, purposeful grace. The sign above the entrance bore a new addition, a small golden plaque beneath the restaurant's name. The dignity promise, no soul turned away hungry. The city had not forgotten what had happened. The video of the slap, of the gold card, of the old man's quiet revelation had spread beyond the restaurant walls, igniting conversations in homes, schools, and newsrooms. People spoke not just of humiliation and cruelty, but of transformation and hope. Inside, the restaurant looked unchanged. Crystal glasses still caught the light. Chandeliers still glowed like captured stars. But the spirit of the place had shifted. A new corner near the entrance now offered warm bread and water to anyone who walked in hungry. No questions asked, and behind the counter stood Lance. Not the arrogant young man who once sneered at the poor, but someone new. His back was straighter now, not from pride but from purpose. He greeted guests with genuine warmth, his eyes softer, his words kinder. Every plate he served, every smile he offered carried a silent apology. Not just to Elias, but to every soul he had once judged too quickly. Sometimes, when the rush slowed, Lance would glance toward the corner booth by the window. That was where Elias Carter now sat most afternoons. Dressed simply but no longer in rags, he spent his days speaking quietly with those who came in from the streets, listening to their stories, helping them find their way. In their eyes, he was not a disgraced millionaire, but a beacon. Proof that dignity could be reclaimed even from the ashes of humiliation. One evening, as the last guests left and the warm glow of the chandeliers dimmed, Lance approached Elias's table, heart pounding. "I'll never forget what I did," he said, voice low, "but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." Elias looked at him for a long moment, then offered a small, forgiving smile. "That's all any of us can do," he said. "Fall, learn, rise." Outside, a cold rain began to fall, tapping softly against the restaurant's windows. Inside, something new was blooming, compassion where cruelty had lived. purpose where pride had ruled. And as the night deepened, both men, once enemies in a moment of ugliness, realized they were no longer defined by what had happened, but by what they chose to become next.